What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mindset Matters. The title of today's episode is The Mindset of a True Leader. Cue the intro. Welcome back. We have with us today our first returning guest, our Vice President and COO, Christian Tips. So we're going to dive into some topics. We're going to talk about leadership, the importance of leadership, and the mindsets behind it. So whenever I think about leadership, the first thing that comes to my mind is before you can effectively lead others, you have to lead yourself first. So first we'll talk about leading yourself and professional development specifically. So what would you define personal development? I apologize. What would you define personal development as?
How would I define personal development? I believe that personal development is how you grow as an individual, whether it's in the mind, because it's holistic. So it's whether it's in the mind, whether it's in the soul, whether it's physical, like you working out, all of those things contribute to who you are as a person. And so, I mean, how would you define it? I think it's pretty spot on.
I agree. And it's really more of an ideology to me. Your personal development has to do with who you are. So the first thing you have to do is you have to decide what type of person do you want to become. And then everything else you do, you'll build off of that.
Right.
So let's take you for example, right? I'm going to put you on the spot. So when you look at your personal development and the type of person you want to become, what does that look like for you from an ideology perspective?
From an ideology perspective, I definitely want to be somebody that you can fall on for spiritual guidance. And so I dedicate a lot of time reading holy books, whether it's the Bible or the Quran, because I want to get an understanding of all holy books so that I can decipher, like truth, because I was started out as a truth seeker, wanting to know truth so that it can benefit myself. And so you see the roots of personal development in that too. When a person's seeking wisdom or seeking truth, it's all for their own benefit in life, whether it's understanding how things work or understanding how they can potentially just grow as a person. And so I spend a lot of time reading the Bible so that I can develop my spiritual wellness, so that I can know, because I know that spiritual wellness is going to affect the physical aspect as well. If I know that I have God who's looking out for me, who's keeping me protected, I feel more confident in doing my day-to-day things, not having to worry about evil coming about and ruining things. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I agree with you. Again, I have a religious background growing up, so that's kind of at the root of who I am as a person as well. I think when you talk about having the backing and guidance of God and the principles that he provides for his followers, I look at rooting your personal identity in something that's larger than yourself has to matter. That has to be where you start, because if it's just about you, if you're only concerned with what's best for you, the minute you hit something that's stronger than you, or that's, that hurts, you're going to stop because you're only doing it for you. Yeah. But when you have something larger that you ascribe to, when you have something larger that your mission is about, then it allows you to continue, because you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the people around you. You're doing it for the people who have yet to come. You're paving a pathway. You're blazing a trail. And so when I look at my personal development and the type of person that I want to become, the type of person that I have been throughout the course of my life so far, I look at a couple of things. So the first thing is being a stabilizing influence. So just having the ability to look at things from the type of perspective that's necessary in order to stabilize existing structure. Being able to infuse structure that allows things to happen, and then also being able to understand how and when to shift things so that it serves the best interests of not me, but
Mm-hmm.
of whoever it is I'm trying to serve,
Mm-hmm.
or whoever it is that is relying on me to blaze that trail or that path or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's driving production inside of business environments, or if it's trying to create structure for a brand new organization, if it's trying to provide personal development for future leaders, whatever it is, it's all about trying to figure out what is going to be in the best interests of the people that I am trying to give value to.
Yeah.
So I'm huge. I'm a huge believer in providing value,
Yeah.
and that's what makes you who you are. The value that you provide, in my opinion. Um, so I guess the next thing, once you know who you are, right? What do you want your life to look like becomes the next real question,
Yeah.
because you've decided what you're going to commit to. Now it's now. So like for you personally, what does your life look like when you look at the future? From again, it doesn't have to be specific detail, but just
Yeah.
give us the ideology behind it.
I'll be pretty specific on this one because it's specific. So I would say I do want to be a pastor of a church in the future. So I see myself being the leader of a church, being able to lead people to God, being able to inspire them. And it's something that's helped me on my journey. Being able to be closer with God helped me in entrepreneurship. It helped me be a better student in college. It helped me be overall a better person. And so, and I'm constantly growing. There's weaknesses that I have and that are still attached to me to this day. But as I'm growing, I know that in the future, those things will diminish and my strengths will come out more and more. And so that's how I see my future. I want people to be able to be affected by what has helped me on my journey. So the patterns that I've seen that's helped me, I want them to be able to see the pattern in their own lives so that they can apply that and see the structure amongst everything, see the structure that's in their own journey, see what works in their industry so that it works for them as well.
Okay. That sounds, yeah, that's consistent with what I observe in the way that you conduct yourself. So yeah, like I'm thinking about for me, because it's an interesting question, because I have not always looked at things as far as my future the way I currently do.
Mm.
So I think with a lot of the experience that I've had in life, both professionally, inside of professional business environments, and also in early education, and now even in secondary education, there's been an intersection that's been unlocked recently for me.
Mm.
The intersection of business and education,
Mm.
and the power that that has to transform lives. There are principles that I pull from my love of sports,
Mm.
and that sports background, that also infuses personality into, well, I wouldn't say personality, that infuses things into the way that I operate. But when I look at my future, I just want to take all of that and turn it into something that's useful for the next generation.
Yeah.
Because to me, there's nothing more valuable to invest in than the future. I want the next generation to be better at my age than I am now. I want
Yeah.
them to be more successful so that they can take that, they can hand it to the next generation, and so on and so forth. So just providing guidance, infusing value, and then making sure that from an ideology perspective, that people know how to look at their future in a way that's going to allow them to best navigate making that happen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I want my life to look like. So
And that leaves
yeah,
a legacy, honestly. It leaves a legacy. It leaves your imprint on multiple generations. And so it's like even after you're gone and dead in the grave, it's like there's a remnant of you still in the world. A remnant. A remnant of you still is in the world.
yeah, and honestly, the way I look at it is, it's not even about me, right? Because each person is gonna, when you create that ripple effect, or when you begin that ripple effect, each person takes that and they add their imprint to it. And so, really, what it is about is it's just about creating a community around, creating a movement of empowerment, not just through mindset, but also
Mm-hmm.
through with education, with business, just being able to look at things from a certain perspective and understand how to maximize what we've been given, the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities that we have. the things that we can accomplish as people. So
Yeah.
I just look at it as investing in the future because it's the most valuable thing that anybody can invest in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the term give glory to God kind of comes from, because it's like ultimately these things don't resonate within oneself. It's something that everybody has the potential of getting a piece of, like whether it's intelligence, whether it's wealth, whether it's anything. Every human being has the capacity to do so, and it's like, okay, where does that capacity come from?
Yeah. Yep. I like that. And that's exactly, I was, um, as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking the same thing when you asked that question. But yeah, so when I look at that, it's what you're grabbing onto and handing to people is something that's larger than yourself. It comes from somewhere other than yourself. It
Mhm.
flows through you. It belongs not to you.
Yeah.
That's an expression I read in a book, but it's true that that's essentially what it is. You're using yourself as a vessel for making sure that other people can understand principles that have stood the test of time and that can
Yeah.
affect their life positively. So it's providing value, um, and the value you provide is what makes you who you are.
Yeah.
It's not about like the glory doesn't go to anyone other than God
Yeah.
always. So
Always. Yeah.
I like that. So the next question, because you touched on it a little bit, right? So you talked
Mhm.
about some of your strengths.
Yeah.
So what would you consider your strengths? It's time now for you to pat yourself on the back.
Pat me on the back.
If you had just looking at yourself from an objective standpoint, what would you consider to be your strengths?
I would say my strength is definitely my detail oriented mind. So like being able to see the tiny details and everything, as we've talked about in my previous episode, episode 2. We did talk about that. So I'm very detail oriented. I like to see the fine details of everything, because I feel like it helps you get to the bigger picture, knowing the little steps that it takes. And so if you miss one little step, it could jeopardize you getting to your destination, or you may have to reroute. But if you're trying to be time efficient, you want to get the little details. And so I feel like that's my strength, being able to plan. Now, obviously, I would say there's a weak side of that where you do end up, even though you're aiming for time efficiency in the execution side of things,
Mm,
you spend a lot of time in the planning for quick execution. And it's like if it never gets executed, then all that time you spent planning, it's like it was for nothing. But if you spend a little bit of time planning and a little bit of time executing, it's like you're still getting things done, and you can still go back and plan and then do the execution, plan, execute.
yeah,
So do each step should have its own plan and execution, rather than have one big plan and then execute.
right.
Hmm.
I think that's huge. And then if you do have big steps, sometimes the planning has to be longer, but
Hmm.
the feedback you get from testing things early will
Hmm.
let you know where you need to pivot because there is no such thing as a perfect idea.
Right.
Ideas never come out perfect, but they can still be good. But it's not the idea that's good. It's what you make of it.
Yeah.
And so those things that you test will give you an opportunity to do that. So like I always look at it this way. Sometimes people say, "Oh, well, you're spending all this time planning if you're trying to do something big."
Mm.
It's almost like to me like a slingshot, right? So it
Yeah.
appears as though you're going
Pulling
this
back.
way, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as you let go, you're
Going
shooting,
forward.
yeah, you're shooting forward at a fast enough pace to make up for all of, and it's sometimes even surpass
Oh
the
yeah.
time that you spent pulling back. So it's the strength of your plan that improves the trajectory and the speed of your execution.
Yeah.
But you don't always have to do, you don't have to take forever to do this. Sometimes you can do this,
Oh
right?
yeah.
You can just
You
pull
just pull
back,
it really back.
let go.
Yeah.
And so, but understanding the strength comes from the planning. And
Hmm.
that's what informs your ability to move at the speed you need to hit your target.
Yeah.
So that's what I look at with that. But and I was kind of thinking about that as you were talking about the importance of planning
Yeah.
and detail orientedness. What else? What other strengths do you feel like you have? So in addition to your attention to detail,
Let's see. That's just a an aspect. That's pretty much the main thing that's led me into my other strengths. Like I would say I can break down the Bible pretty easily, just from the fact that I like looking at the details and seeing how they relate to other verses and getting the bigger picture of things. So if there's a verse that says this, I want to see if there's other verses that say that as well. Or
cross
if I'm
referencing,
just,
yeah,
yeah, cross
yeah,
referencing.
I like that.
Exactly. And then I'll even go down into the details where it's like, okay, what word was this translated from? And what did that word mean 1,000 years ago? Because it may not mean the same thing nowadays, where how we use it. And so there's like the word definitions are always changing. And so I like looking at that too, if it'll change the way that I look at something. And so even today, if it's not the Bible, even if it's just a book, or even if it's just listening to other people, they have a different perspective on the same words that I'm using, or the same strategies that I'm using. They have a different perspective or a different outlook on it. So I would say another strength that I probably would have is just, I mean, I say I listen. Now, do I oftentimes do I oftentimes act on the advice? Maybe not, but I still listen. And then it resonates. It's in my subconscious now, and I'll come back to it. I'm like,
Sometimes it takes time,
it
yeah,
takes
for it to
time.
settle in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna help you out with the strengths here because what I see when I look at you as well, in addition to your ability to operate at a high level on the analytic side,
Mm.
what I think is even more rare is to have someone who can operate on the same level in the creative space.
Mm.
Usually, you're gifted. Usually, a person is gifted with one or the other
Mm.
at a super high level. You can do both at a very high level, and so it just to me that's what blows me away is I exist almost exclusively on the analytic side.
Mm.
I don't consider myself to be creative at all
Mm.
because I don't know. Just I've never been good at it. But
Well,
like,
I would say it just comes from like, I didn't grow up the same way you did. And so it's like how I grew up, there was creative ability, and then a little bit of the analytical side of things. But it was like it was a well blend, only because I got into like video games, and I got into like what else? Music. I got into a little bit of art, but mainly, like, for example, video editing. So way back in like middle school, I just saw somebody who edited this video together, and I was like, that's really cool. I want to do that. Only because
mm,
it was cool. So I wanted to see like what I like. So the music that I like, the different type of sceneries that I like to look at, I wanted to apply it to myself, so that I was not only looking at somebody else's piece of creation, but I wanted to see what I could create.
okay,
And so I took that, and that's when I made my first, like, I guess, video. And then I was hooked. And so I was like, let me try this and this and this and
try
this. And
different
then
stuff. Yeah,
I showed my friends. I was like, hey, check this out. They liked it too. And I was like, wow. It was just a dopamine rush every time I made one.
yeah.
And so that kind of got me hooked on. Now it was only a hobby. And so that's why today, like, I'll do it every now and then, but it's like I don't really want to do it.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you do an amazing job doing the video editing for the podcast,
Mm.
putting together the intro, which is amazing as well.
Mm.
And sometimes I feel like if we could lock you in a room with your laptop and not let you out until it's done, that we'll be able to get all the video editing value
Oh
out of you.
man.
But I understand it's not your favorite thing to do, but you're very good at it, and that's
Mm.
to me, I'm almost jealous of that because I guess, and it makes sense because you grew up as an actual person, like
What is that supposed to
like
mean?
you did things, right? So
Uh,
like I was kind of very very nerdy. Um, Oddly enough, I did play sports, but
mm.
beyond that, it was just reading books, playing chess,
Mhm.
off in the corner, being you know insanely analytical,
Yeah.
being neurotic almost about learning, and so that's kind of just I guess that does make sense. But even when I look at people, it's very rare that people are gifted in both areas. So, and then I know some of that stuff. It you have to take gifts and put work into developing them to get to that high level. So for
Mm.
you to have worked on both of those things, I think makes you a very well-rounded person. Um,
Well, I mean, I would say you're well-rounded in a sense too, because how I look at it is that creativity isn't necessarily in the like, it doesn't have to be something solely within the arts field, where it's like something visual. Creativity can be something within the midst of structure. So like how you structure something, you're in a sense building something creatively, where it's like you're building a model. And structure, for example, like a house. You don't have to build a house the same way every single time. you can reshape it, and that's creativity in and of itself. And you can structure it to fit 3 people, you can structure it to fit 50 people, like mansions, but ultimately it'll all have a foundation, but they're not all going to be the same foundation. It may be a different material that they all use. Those things are something that I can see you doing in the business field, where you can create a structure that can be different depending on the industry. You can notice that difference within each because you have that creative mind where you're like, okay, they're using this model, they're using this model, and they're using this model.
I guess I could see that. Yeah, probably creative thought is probably the only thing that if you want to, you're laughing. That's probably a thing that I can do.
Mhm.
And I've probably seen that as well. But let's go. We talked about your strengths, so um, just to kind of exercise that muscle of self awareness, let's talk
Mhm.
about what you see as weaknesses. What are some
Oh
things you can
man,
see that you need to work on?
there's definitely a lot of weaknesses that I got. That's for sure. Um, I get passionate a lot, so like I would say it's rooted in my passion, but in that passion, emotions come out.
The hands. The
The
hands.
hands.
Get the
So it's like,
hands.
as I get passionate for something, I may strongly assert my voice in a manner, and it's like I can relax. It's really excitement. That's all it is. And so I get a little antsy and stuff when points are thrown and thoughts of reasoning, but it's like ultimately I just need to settle down and just, be more calm. And so I feel like that's one weakness I can work on, is just be more serene, if that's the word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just relaxed and comfortable and confident. Because I think one thing that my mother always told me growing up is like, if you're right, you'll still be right when they finish speaking. So
Mm.
you don't have to interrupt them. You can let them, and you may even be able to figure out how to better guide them to where they need to be if you let them finish speaking.
Mm.
But yeah, that just requires like a little bit of, I guess, patience, and sometimes it just having a lot of difficult conversations. Eventually, you pick up on patterns, and you're like, okay,
Mm.
I already know that. Let me let them, because people need to be heard
Mm.
first, and then they'll be able to listen to you. But if
Yeah.
you cut them off and don't let them hear you, so like I know that's something I've had to work on too. Is it's kind of been nailed into me, growing up, to
Hmm.
just don't be so prideful so as to assume that you know what they're going to say. Like, let them finish
Hmm.
speaking, and if you're right, you'll still be right, and then you can help them to be right too. Which, like, I guess that's a mindset thing.
I can see that.
But and it just comes with experience, and sometimes it just comes with having doing it once and then realizing it's like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna do this now
Yeah.
because it works, like, and it feels better doing it. So I don't know, but I feel like you're doing a great job navigating that, and even just being aware of it is
Hmm.
like, that's the first step, and then just with time you'll continue to improve in that area. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you have a lot of weaknesses, at least not from what I see. I think sometimes it's just there's usually one or two big things that a
Hmm.
person has to like, and it's only a slight shift in mindset
Hmm.
that because you'd be surprised how often, well, I don't think you're surprised, like, you're not wrong very often when it comes to the facts, but sometimes it's just a matter of like
Well,
how you go about, like, execute, like, that's what I'm saying. So
yeah.
sometimes with that, and I know for me, like, I'll go with me, right? I'll start with my weaknesses.
Hmm.
um so one of my weaknesses is, it's sometimes I can, no, seriously, because I'm trying to figure out what to call it, um because it's evolved over the years,
Okay.
despite my attempts to to snuff it out.
Stuff it out.
I guess there's a form of stubbornness, that
Oh yeah.
there's a form of stubbornness where I think, like you, sometimes, even though it doesn't always come across in my vocal tonality or my
Hmm.
or my facial expressions, sometimes I get to a point where I have a zero tolerance for things that don't make sense.
Mm.
So, and
Yeah.
it's very tough for me. I have to restrain myself heavily, because, like, if it doesn't make sense, it's like, I mean, it's like, I can't. You see what I'm saying? Like I can't even like because there's no way to like you can't explain things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
See, I can be okay with things as long as I understand. Like if I can understand it, then
Hmm.
I can set it off to the side.
Yeah.
If I'm being met with something that makes zero sense, man, that's tough.
Yeah.
That is tough. So that's where I kind of go, I go to the point where you were talking about, where I start to get passionate, I start to go
Oh
more
yeah.
animated, and usually the way it comes out for me is language, right? So,
Language.
and I don't mean bad language. What I mean is
Right.
like
Yeah.
my word choice starts to become more refined. It becomes more pinpoint and accurate, and so I will just sometimes I will go through the process of evisceration
uh,
via words.
like you're saying, you get more blunt with your words. Like you just say it straight off. Like how like.
I tried to provide examples, and so that impatience for
Hmm.
for not getting it or not making sense kind of came out, and I gotta put a hold on that sometimes. But
Yeah.
it's that's tough. So that would probably be my biggest weakness. Other weaknesses is personality, I would say, like
Personality. How's that a weakness?
the lack thereof. So sometimes I come across as very monotoned and robotic.
But that's a
Right. So
personality.
I
It's a
guess
personality
robotic personality.
that we
Okay.
cherish.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if anybody cherishes that. But it comes across too, like in when I get into my mind and I'm starting to think about things. If I'm talking about something, you'll notice like I start to like when I'm really focused, I look away, right? Because now I'm
Mm.
visualizing it in my head. And what I see are
Hell yeah.
words, not images. So
Mm.
literally it's like I see in words. So I'm just analytically talking about things, and my voice starts to drop off, my
Mm.
gesticulation starts to go away. And so I just have to be careful to make sure that I'm present in the moment when I'm
Mm.
talking, because I do a lot of thinking out loud, and it
Yeah.
appears to be just very at times analytical. So I would say those are probably two of my biggest weaknesses. Strengths, I'm very deliberate and intentional.
Mm.
So I don't do things unless I believe they need to be done.
Mm.
I also don't say things unless I believe they need to be said.
Mm.
So there's a lot of thought that goes into the way I communicate.
Mm.
And it's something I've had to develop over time, because in response to those weaknesses that I mentioned before, I've had to gather more ways of saying things. So,
Yeah.
I've increased I've tried to work on my communication skills to get to the point where I can effectively communicate what I'm trying to say, very specifically, so that it doesn't get misunderstood
Right.
one way or the other, so that I don't have to end up repeating myself. And I would say probably communication and thoughtful, intentional communication is probably one thing. And then just,
Mm.
I'm a nerd, right? So, and at the heart of nerd behavior is curiosity.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's a strength as well. I'm very curious
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
things, not from a creative perspective, though, oddly enough,
Yeah.
from an analytical. Like, I wonder how that works. I wonder
Yeah.
why that works. I wonder how I can use that to make me better as a person,
Yeah.
or make the things that I'm doing better. And I'll do that with anything
Yeah.
from music. I don't really listen to music. I don't watch TV either. Uh, I do that with
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, but seriously, like I'll do that with anything. If I'm looking at something that I find fascinating, I want to
Mm.
figure out why that triggers me in the way it does, and how I can use the power of that to create impact in other people's lives as well. So just that curiosity. Um, so I would say that that would probably be, those two things would be strengths, in addition to my weaknesses. But I think it's important to know what they are,
Yeah.
to be aware of them.
Absolutely.
So the next thing, once you know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, how do you leverage your strengths to be who you are and to provide the maximum amount of impact inside of society?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, man, your strengths essentially are the things that you spend the most time on, basically, or has spent the most time on up until this point. And so, whatever your strength is, just know that you dedicate a lot of time to get that strength. Some things are talents where you may not necessarily have needed to develop it over time. You were just pretty much genetically gifted with it. But most times, if it's intelligence or whether it's being analytical, or whether it's your creativity, your ability to create a fine piece of art. Most of those things do require a lot of time developing it. And so once you know that you're able to do this thing that has the potential of doing an impact, now you have to do the brainstorming, like, okay, how am I going to use this skill to improve my finance, or how am I going to use this skill to improve the well-being of the people around me? So like, for example, if it's a piece of artwork, you can either use it for monetary gain, that skill for monetary gain, or you can also use it to paint a picture of the situation that you're in, or to paint a picture of a real world problem, or or a reality, and it can inspire people. And so you'll be affecting people's way of thinking. And so I think in any skill, the moment that you're impacting a way the person thinks, I think that's profound. And I think it's going to lead to more action being done around a certain issue.
Okay. Yeah, I can see I can see that natural progression. Taking something that you're already strong at and then just maximizing the ability to make impact. I think for me, like if I'm going to use my strengths as an example to like leverage them to make an impact,
Yeah.
I would say for me personally, I believe that intentional thought and articulated thought are
Mm-hmm.
probably among the two highest or the two most important cognitive skills to develop. And the reason why I say that is because, like, once you understand something, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to get someone else to understand it. But
Yeah.
unless you can do that, it's lost because it dies with you. And
Yeah.
so I feel like the maximum impact that you can make on the future and on the next generation, on society as a whole, is being able to first understand things at a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
And then, two, even more importantly, being able to take what's inside of you and give it to somebody else, as far as like
Absolutely.
distilling all of the experience, all of the knowledge, all of the things that you've learned over
Mm-hmm.
the course of your life and being able to hand it to someone else so that they can use it to do whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So that comes in the form of empowerment. It comes in the form of mindset.
Yeah.
It becomes, well, yeah, empowerment, but yeah, but that's and that's good because those two things, and then it comes in the form of like technical competence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the two largest predictors of success in Western society, the literature suggests, is technical competence followed by trade conscientiousness.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing what you're doing and then following through, actually, doing it, knowing how to do things at a high level, and then pushing yourself to do those things for the sake of society.
Yeah.
And that's what builds and allows things to exist on a societal level. Without enough of that, things start to crumble
Yeah.
because sometimes you have people who are either not able or not willing. Sometimes you have people who are both.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, people will struggle with one or the other. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, you're talented individuals, they just don't want to do it, right? Like with
Right.
you in video editing. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I have to use that, but no, it's like we, but like you could see that even inside of yourself, there's something that you can do well, um, but like you don't always want to do it.
Yeah.
And high, people who have the ability to do things at a high level sometimes struggle with that. And others, sometimes people who struggle to learn things, they're really good at executing once they learn it, but their struggle is learning it.
Yeah.
So being able to put those two things together, I think is going to make the maximum impact for me personally, and I think just overall in general. So that's what I look at when I look at leveraging strengths. Um, but let's talk about strengthening weaknesses. So we know what our weaknesses are. How do you
Yeah.
go about strengthening them? How much time should you devote to working on something that you know you're not good at versus leveraging your strengths? Because you want to do both, but you don't want to do one at the expense of the other. So
Right.
how would you answer that?
I would say it would have to be something that is hindering you from your top priorities. So if you need to have something that you prioritize, because there's no such thing as a man with multiple or more than five priorities. Because if you have more than five priorities, you have none, because you're dedicating time to multiple things. And now it's as though you have no time to spend on something that you prioritize. And so
Yeah.
I would say pick three things that you want to prioritize in life. And then if you see something that you have that's hindering you from reaching that, then you need to write it down. And then you need to make I guess, a list of which one's hindering me the most. So whether it's like an emotional trait of like anger or sadness, like depression, anxiety, if it's something that's hindering you, try to develop a habit each and every day that'll kind of suppress that, or rather transmute it into something that's more beneficial. So, what do you think is the opposite of anxiety?
I would say the opposite of anxiety is peace.
Okay.
Yeah, let's say peace.
Peace, your
Or
confidence.
confidence. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of those two things. And so when I think about what you just said, it kind of thinks in sports, athletes do this a lot. So if you ever watched an interview of an athlete being interviewed before they go do something amazing or they play in a big game, usually the reporter will ask, "Are you nervous?"
Mm.
And almost all of them say the same thing. No, I'm not nervous. I'm excited.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so the reason why that's effective is because like your nervous system literally cannot tell the difference between the two. Your body exhibits the same symptoms when you're nervous as it does when you're excited.
Yeah.
And so it becomes about your mindset. It becomes about the story you tell yourself about what's happening. And so they refuse to believe that they're nervous, even if they are. They tell themselves they're excited, and usually
Yeah.
that plays out well for them. And so in life, it's the same. What we tell ourselves will have a large impact over how we operate and how we're able to execute in different spaces. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. A couple things to keep in mind. So we just had our ETMF monthly live seminar for this month. We talked about market research and opportunity identification. We will be having weekly workshops where we'll work on this module. So in between module 2 and module 3, there'll be opportunities for people to engage with that principle. You bring your business ideas, bring your thoughts and questions, and we'll work on how to conduct market research on those things. So that's for the ETMF Academy. So there will be links in the description for how you can engage with the workshops on a weekly basis. And also you'll receive some information about when our next monthly live seminar is. Next thing we have going on is we have our speaker series on November 22nd. So please take a look at the RSVP form or the link in the description. You'll be able to indicate whether or not you're going to be able to make it for either of those things. So we're looking forward to being able to engage with you guys. If you found this episode to be valuable, please like, comment, subscribe.
Turn on the notification bell.
That's right. Share with your friends. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. So with that being said, we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Mindset Matters.
Only for the hardworking.